When you really think about it, my friend, a lot of things depend on people and their perspectives. And now I have probably talked about that a lot, at least I think I have. But for today's video, I want to focus on community and fandom. And part of the reason is that with storytelling and creativity, there is at least probably a slight desire for there to be fans or a bit of fame to our work. At least I think so. And that's probably natural because again, it's sort of like what we do, so we want people to appreciate it. But there are certain things that can be either beneficial or kind of stumbling blocks. And there are sort of things where it's kind of like yes and no. It's a purely matter of perspective. And one of those things is a buzzword that I hear a lot, just probably due to listening to popular culture news. But that is the toxic fans. And you almost see it everywhere where it's like, oh yeah, the toxic fans did this, the toxic fans did that. And the thing about that is who really decides what's toxic? In a way, it's purely a matter of perspective, as toxic has become a bit of a muddled term, as now it generally means whoever doesn't think or do what someone else wants them to or how they want them to think. It's basically a new way of saying, how dare you disagree with me? How dare you do this? How dare you do that? And again, it's not, when you really examine what people are calling toxic, it's not just about purely destructive things. I mean, well, what I mean is, if you really listen to kind of both sides, and I kind of listen to mostly on who would probably be considered toxic, or at least people who go after the fan base more than people of those perspective, because like, let's hear what the other side has to say in defense. But the thing is, when you really listen to what people tell toxic these days, you can see that there are a lot of things that are actually not really toxic at all. For example, we can think of the encouragement to do better, to get better at the craft, to draw. That can be considered toxic to people who don't want to draw. Criticism. People don't like to be told they're wrong. So any form of criticism, from complaining, which can be kind of toxic, to even constructive criticism made to have people get better, can be considered toxic because people don't want to be told they're wrong. Or even other people just being successful or happy in something can be told toxic by someone who is miserable or unsuccessful, or just wants to see that person miserable and unsuccessful and is mad that they're succeeding. So clearly they are a toxic person because they aren't doing what they aren't in the box that person wants them to be in. So again, there are these little things that are just sort of like people say are toxic, but it's all in their perspective. It's basically the world is not going the way they want, so that's toxic. So the word toxic has kind of lost its meaning. Where it used to be stuff that was destructive, it's solely what people say it is right now. Now, as for stuff that I think is actually toxic, first off, I want to talk about toxic positivity because it goes back to that point on criticism, where people don't like criticism, it's toxic and so forth. So let's just not criticize. Let's not have anyone critique anything. Let's just talk about how everything is great and everything is fine, and just this whole army of yes men around us where everything is fine and dandy and so forth, and nobody is going to tell us the bridge is out. So that's just one of the things that can really happen, and people often want to do, where just so forth, where there's nothing to really improve, there's nothing that can be said wrong. And it's one of those things that can really be destructive in the long term because, again, just surrounding yourself with yes men is a recipe for disaster when you're trying to do anything of note. Because, sure, it may work out for a time, but once the rubber hits the road, something is probably going to go wrong, and nobody's probably going to have a clue on how to handle it, and they'll just start blaming someone else for their failures or that they didn't see it coming because they tried to hide the information or hide the truth or so forth. And again, there kind of needs to be a thing where people won't get a comeuppance for basically saying, hey, this might be a mistake. So again, that needs to be valued in the culture of whatever is going on. And some people don't value that. But And then it's sort of something that needs to be considered where when everything is just yes, 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 positive, 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 it can be really destructive when push comes to shove. But continuing off of that, there's kind of almost like this fanatical. And again, there are some people who are crazy about some things and do weird stuff, but I want to talk about the ones that are where something is always the bestest ever or they are always right about something. And again, we probably always have those people, but in fandoms and so forth, it can be a bit weird where there are people who are always assured that their franchise is best and get into those flame wars about everything. And especially when they actually don't have any reasons for it or so forth, you can kind of tell, but and also there are like, oh, this character's the bestest or whatever, and it can just be kind of weird when there isn't any counterplay or anything of, oh yeah, but this was said one time or was said multiple times, or whatever, and so that is the law, or what, there's no kind of counterplay or counterbalance or whatever. So it can just get kind of annoying. But then there are other people who are assured that they are right in their perspective, they are right in their concept of it. Now, their concept may not actually be supported by the material, or it may be slightly hinted at, but they are so sure of their kind of perspective being right that they basically say anyone who disagrees with them is a bad person. And you can see those types a lot, and it's like they just keep going and going and going, but it's always like if you disagree with them, you're a bad person. And it's just like it's just a difference of perspective, and the thing isn't actually canon to the story at all. It doesn't have virtually any support, or it has barely any. And there may actually be other things that are more strongly supported. So it's just sort of one of those things to really think of and consider in a way, and to be wary of, I would say. But another thing that can be kind of toxic that we may not think about is being addicted to consuming content. And it's just in that state of always consuming something, always having something to watch, always needing to watch something just to watch it. Because it harkens back to the old bread and circuses used by tyrants to control the masses, where if they if the people were basically fed or had their provisions or whatever, and basically had entertainment, they wouldn't question what was going on. They wouldn't question things that were going on in their society, and they wouldn't basically change their stations either. And that is one of the things is that when we get into that state of just consuming something to consume, rather than thinking about, okay, I want to watch this to watch this. I mean, again, there are times where we might want to just veg out to relax or whatever, to just not really think. But there are times when it is good to think, it is good to kind of think, take stock of our lives and so forth, to grow and change, to even create stuff of our own rather than just consuming. So it is kind of something to really think about is, are we just consuming to consume, or are we being like, hey, I want to watch this, so I'm going to do it. So it's kind of a murky thing, but it's just something I want to put out there to be wary of. But as to something that may not actually be that toxic, or as toxic as people say it is gatekeeping. Well, and then there are kind of different methods to this, because one of it is that with gatekeeping is most people are actually happy to share their hobbies with you. They just want you to enjoy it as they enjoy it. They don't want someone to come in and try to change it so that it becomes all about them. And that's one of the key things is that there are some people who have to be affirmed, have to be validated by something. Now, sure, there are some people who just are like, they don't like someone and are like, they don't want them to have any part of, they don't want to share the same space with them. But then there are some people who are like, oh yeah, everything has to then be about them. Everything has to conform to what they want it to conform to. So they actually want it to change to be what they want rather than what the thing was. So that's where probably some of the gatekeeping comes in a sense, where it's actually about keeping something as it is rather than having someone try to twist it to affirm and validate themselves. But on a point for gatekeeping being toxic, I would say there is something with success where there are some people who would actually try to teach others how to be successful like them or reach down a hand, whereas other people will basically try to take up the ladder from behind them so that no one else can reach the top like they did. So it's just something to really be aware of just in the world in general. But on to kind of the benefits of fans and community, where I'm probably mostly siding with. Because the thing is, it harkens back to the patrons of old who would basically provide a living for artists or a space for artists to create. And the thing is, to ask ourselves as creative, what does it take to make a living at it? What does it take to provide a family? Do we need to have another job to keep doing what we want to do? Or could having enough fans actually make ways to do it full time? So that's something to really consider. Of course, that requires the fans to like your work enough to basically make exchanges on whatever system you want them to. So those are just sort of things to keep in mind as you trade. But another thing is that community can build hype or help carry it, keep it going. Where if someone is just watching a show by themselves, they may be like, oh, that's great, and I might be excited to see what happens next week, and they're kind of thinking things over. But when they have someone to talk about it, they can bounce ideas off each other. Maybe they even new ideas of what's going on, and so forth. Or maybe people saw the latest news for the game that's being released, so they talked about it with other people. So then other people start getting hyped, and it just sort of bounces off each other to create greater hype than there was in the first place. And then there are things that the community can do that are outside of the system or the franchise. Maybe it's creating a watch list or watch order for the series so that people don't have to watch through filler, or they're putting a show that was broadcast in out of order in the proper order for context and so forth. Or maybe it's where a game doesn't actually explain its mechanics all the time or all that very well, so they create a system outside of the game to kind of have people look at it. Or maybe they're creating mods for a game so that it extends the life of the game a bit more to give more options to players. But a key aspect of community is that it brings people together, and it provides those different perspectives that we may not think about. It may provide ways of different enjoyments of the stories where people have different aspects that they enjoy about a series or so forth. Or maybe it's providing options where it's say, hey, the people actually like this character, I should expand their world in the next installment. Or maybe it's like, oh, I never thought about this function before, I should add it into the game. And so it's something that can benefit both the creatives and the fans themselves. At least those are my thoughts on it. Why not share yours in the comments below? And if you enjoyed this video, you can like and share it so others may enjoy as well. Anyway, I'm Jonah, and you've been watching Lionsman Media, where we select stories and lessons of them. Thank you for listening to my musings. Talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.